want to start to feel happy, it starts with you wanting to feel happy. We like to sit and dwell. We like to sit in our own sadness. Make sure you're spending time every single day, whether it's 15, 20 minutes, whether it's an hour, 2 hours. Take time to allow your mind separation from the stresses of your day. If you expect to fail, you will fail. On the other hand, if you expect to win, you will win. And he's right, because doctors and psychologists, both alike, they agree that worrying actually does shorten your life, and it does damage your body. We need to clear our thinking before we go to sleep. We're talking about a book that Norman Vincent Peale wrote, The Power of Positive Thinking. Let's kick this off with golden nugget number 1, creating your own inner happiness. That you are responsible for your own happiness. Because unhappiness is usually the byproduct of you thinking sad thoughts, you having these negative feelings, you having resentment towards others, and just having an overall crappy outlook on life. So if you think those things, what do you think is going to happen? You have to force yourself to not think those negative thoughts. Peale says we have to get into the happiness habit by thinking upbeat, cheery thoughts throughout the day. We like to sit and dwell. We like to sit in our own sadness. I don't like to do that, but I just know that sometimes my brain forces me to do that, and I don't know why. So I have to force myself to not do that. I have to put on upbeat music. I have to go do something productive. I have to get in the gym. I have to go hang around friends that are going to make me laugh. And it's tough. At first, it doesn't feel right. It feels like you're forcing it because you are forcing it. But eventually, it starts to make you feel better. There are miracles happening all around you. There is beauty all around you. Open your eyes and look. Can you see the sun shining? Great. Can you hear the birds chirping? Great. Can you feel the warmth of the sun on your skin? Awesome. There's simple beauties all around us. If you want to start to feel happy, it starts with you wanting to feel happy. So short circuit those negative thoughts. And when you start to feel bad, when you start to find yourself gossiping, feeling guilty, feeling angry, feeling whatever it is you're feeling that's negative, turn that around. Force yourself to think positively, do positive things. And while it doesn't feel right at first, keep going. You're on the right path. Golden nugget number 2, the antidote to anxiety. Is that people waste a lot of their time, a lot of their energy fuming and fretting about things that they cannot control. Go back to Covey's principle. Circle of concern, circle of influence. Focus only on those things in the circle of influence. Everything else in the circle of concern, you can't control. You can't affect that. So move on. Don't allow your mind to just spend time in that space. You're wasting your mind's energy. So as part of this antidote to anxiety, Peale says that we need to slow down to relieve our anxiety and to attain peace. And he suggests meditation. He suggests that we devote at least 15 minutes daily to calming and relaxing ourselves by thinking peaceful thoughts, or not thinking anything at all. So something he shares in the book is to help get rid of the tendency to worry and get angry, we need to relax and spend a few minutes thinking about beautiful, peaceful settings, hearing the birds chirping, feeling the sun on our face, all these things that I was talking about before, where it's just a matter of you actually thinking that in your mind. Wherever you are, if you're at work, if you're in your house, it doesn't, or close your eyes and open your mind to maybe a place where you were on vacation before. And go there for 15 minutes. Smell the smells, feel what the sand feels like on your feet, feel yourself plunging into the ocean. So the antidote to anxiety, it's all about clearing your mind. However you choose to do that, make sure you're spending time every single day, whether it's 15, 20 minutes, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, if you're working out at the gym, whether you're doing yoga, whether you're going to cycling class, whatever, take time to allow your mind separation from the stresses of your day. Golden nugget number 3, expect the best. If you expect to fail, you will fail. On the other hand, if you expect to win, you will win. So, what seeds are you planting in your mind? Are you planting seeds of positivity or seeds of negativity? Guess what? Your life is going to give you back more of that. Are you planting seeds of, doubt and, I'm not going to make this work, or something bad is going to happen? If If you're planting seeds of that, guess what you're going to get? More of that. Start focusing on the positive. Start focusing on how things can go right. And guess what? When things go wrong, say, there's a lesson in that for me. Because life doesn't happen to me, it happens for me. So everything that's happening is there to teach me a lesson. This isn't a setback, it's a set up. This thing that's really bad, it happened for a reason. I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to get better. Golden nugget number 4, worry not. And he's right, because doctors and psychologists, both alike, they agree that worrying actually does shorten your life, and it does damage your body. We need to clear our thinking before we go to sleep, and we need to imagine our worries flowing out of our body like water out of a glass. So don't think that my path is the right path. No. This path is good for me. I replaced worry with hope by putting together goals. I put together 3 goals: a financial related goal, a health related goal, and a profession related goal. Something that what I was going to do with my life. And back in the day when I was going through those stresses, I was worrying a lot. I was having a tough time sleeping. I was having chest pains. My heart was palpitating all the time. And I really just could not get, a high level of satisfaction in life. And, if you were saying on a scale of 1 to 8, Ryan, again, 9s and 10s are reserved for very special times in our lives that seldom happen. I was sitting at a 4 consistently, where I would wake up and I'd all of a sudden feel the stresses of the day. I would pass between 3 and 4 all the time. So what I did was to replace that worry, that anxiety, that fear. I built myself a plan that gave me hope, goals that gave me hope, something that got me excited, something that I wanted to work towards, something I wanted to achieve because I knew that if I did, it would get me out of this mess and my life would be better as a result. Golden nugget number 5, problem solving. I had problems that I needed solutions to. I had desires, I had wants, I had dreams, I had goals that I needed a solution to. The crap show was a solution. Create Your 8 was a solution. But what I did need to do was take myself out of the busyness of the day and allow my mind to sort of free up and look for inspiration all around me. And know that whatever solution I'm looking for, it's going to come to me. And this is where in this golden nugget in the book where Peele talks about, problem solving, he gives us 10 problem solving techniques, which many of them I believe with. The first one, believe that for every problem there is a solution. So yes, believe that your problem can be solved. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, you don't have a solution right now, but there is a solution. And oftentimes there's more than one. 2, try to maintain your serenity as you address a problem. So don't feel anxious. Don't try to get angry and say, I'm not getting this. I don't understand. No. You need to be calm. You need to be hopeful that there's going to be a solution to this problem. Number 3, don't try to force an answer. Don't try to say like, oh my God, I need an answer by Saturday at noon. If I don't get it by Saturday at noon, then it's too late. Sometimes you can't force it. Life often happens for you. And so you just need time for that to reveal itself to you. Number 4, gather all relevant information. Pretty simple. Do as much research as possible. Number 5, write down all facts about the situation. Again, get understanding for the problem, what's going on. You need to get clarity on the problem so you can get clear on what solutions you need to solve it. Number 6, spend time praying about the issue you are confronting. Listen, if you're praying about it, that's fine. If you're not praying about it, maybe you're thinking about it. Always make time to think about it. When you're walking in nature, yes, take time to think in nature and allow your mind to flow. But when you separate yourself from the stresses, the anxieties, the busyness of the day, allow your time to think about solutions. Number 7, believe in and seek God's guidance on the promise of the 73rd Psalm, "Thou wilt guide me by thy counsel." If you believe in the religious aspect of that will talk to you. That necessarily doesn't talk to me, so I maybe won't be using that one. Number 8, rely on your inner gifts of insight and intuition. There's things that we believe we should do, and then there's things that we know we should be doing. So you got to listen to yourself, and it takes time. It does take time. It takes patience. It takes some maturity for you to realize what you're great at. And sometimes you're doing something just to make a living, just because it's my job, it's my career, it's what I believe I'm great at. But you have other gifts within you that maybe you're not exploring yet, that you should be. Number 9, attend religious services where you can and listen peacefully and let your subconscious work on the problem. Again, you can go to church or you can just go for walks. I love going for walks, period. I'll put music on my ears and allow myself to think. Pretty simple. Number 10, the answer that develops in your mind or comes to pass is the right answer. So I just allowed the thoughts that came in my mind. Whenever I had a thought, an inspired thought, I wrote it down on my phone. Pulled up my phone, opened up the notepad, and just wrote it down. At the end of the day, I would think about it, ponder on it, say, you know what, this idea is something I want to go further into and dig deeper into that. That's exactly how this show happened. That's exactly how Create Your 8 happened. It's exactly how you're going to find solutions to your problems. Last but not least, golden nugget number 6, how to handle heartache. Now, everybody at some point in their life experiences heartache, and it's tough. And so Peel says that for us to get over heartache, we need to resist the heartache by staying busy. So if you're getting a divorce from your husband or your wife, if you just broke up with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, if you just lost a loved one, if a loved one passed away, a friend, a family member, doesn't matter who it is. He says that in order for you to get through it, you need to stay busy. You need to return to your normal activities as soon as possible after a loss or a defeat. And you need to resist the temptation to brood and feel sorry for yourself. I gotta get back to work. I gotta get back to my goals, get back in the gym, get back to eating right, get back to hanging out with my friends, my family, listen to the music that I was listening to. We have to return to life. But sometimes we just have to be sad, and we have to work our way through it. But the key here is to not allow your mind to dwell on it for too long. That's not handling heartache. That's allowing heartache to take control of you and to win.
There's more to reality than meets the eye. In Judaism, and in the world that we live in, we're constantly interacting on primarily 3 realms. The realm of action, which we're most familiar with, the realm of speech, and the realm of thought. Each one more personal and connected with the soul than the next. It's a fundamental belief in our religion that our actions influence material reality. The Ramchal, in his famous work, Mesilas Yesharim, says as follows: if a person will be pulled after the lusts of this world and succumb to them and be drawn away from God, not only do they lower themselves, they bring themselves down, but the world is tainted along with them. The same thing is true on the opposite. If a person withholds from their negative drives, they withhold from their lusts, not only do they uplift themselves, but they uplift the world. So we're used to the realm of action affecting things. And it's become more widespread, something that the Torah has taught for many years, that speech as well has a role in shaping reality. Many people, you see kids sometimes when they argue, the kid wishes something bad, he curses at the other person, he says something really nasty about the other person. I hope you blank, blank, blank. And the parent or another child will say, don't even say that. How could you say that? Why? They're just words. Doesn't do anything. The Baal Shem Tov, in his synagogue, was the founder of the Hasidic movement. And in his synagogue, he encountered 2 people one time in the midst of an argument. And in the midst of their dispute, one yelled at the other, I'm going to tear you apart like a fish. So the Baal Shem Tov gathered all those present in the synagogue. They all stood in a circle and put their arms around each other. And the Baal Shem Tov instructed them, close your eyes. When they closed their eyes, they began to shrink. They saw this person tearing the other person apart like a fish. Meaning that what we say in some realm actually exists. The Talmud teaches that Lashon Hara, speaking bad about somebody else, has a bad effect on 3 people. First one is the one who spoke it. Second one is the one who listened to it. And third is the person that it's about. So I understand when it comes to the one who said it has a bad effect because he shouldn't be talking about those things. And I understand when the person who listened to it causes a negative effect. Why? He shouldn't be listening to those things. But what about the person, the innocent guy, who it's being said about? Why does it have a negative effect? How can it have a negative effect if he's not in the room? He's not going to be insulted. The answer is that just by speaking bad about somebody else, it causes harm to them. The pinnacle of the year that Jews from all circles gather at the synagogue is Kol Nidre night, Yom Kippur. What's the first thing? What's the service named after? All the bad things we did? No. Kol Nidre. All the vows that I said this year. Speech. Speech plays a role. Speech changes reality. The power of speech was recently, within the last few years, done with, experimented with study. Dr. Yusaro Emoto from Japan, many people have heard of the experiment with water crystals. He took water from a spring and poured them into a vat, and one vat, people were saying all sorts of positive things over. They would say thank you, they would say you're welcome, they would say you're so nice, and over the other container of water, they would say you're such an idiot, I hate you, all sorts of negative things. A drop of water was taken from each of these vats and frozen in a freezer by negative 25 degrees Celsius and left for 3 hours. Once that was finished, they took out the droplets and examined it under a microscope between 200 and 500 times magnification. What they saw was that those ice crystals, which had positive things said over them, the ice crystals were perfectly symmetrical and beautiful snow-looking crystals, excuse me. Whereas those that had negative things said over them, just ice, were jagged, all out of kilter. So just the speech over this water had an effect on the way that the crystals froze. There was also a similar experiment done by Israeli chemist Tomer Rebiev and physicist Arik Naveh with bean sprouts. One control of bean sprouts water was used that said blessings over and good things over, and those bean sprouts grew, whereas the one that had curses said over it, negative things said over it, did not grow. Now, take these experiments as you may, everything is subjective, but just the idea that the secular world is beginning to realize that it's beginning to become part of actual research that people can partake in, that speech causes an effect in reality, is something very novel, something 30 years ago that would never be accepted. So let's take it a step back into thought. David Einhorn is the Wall Street guru of an investment philosophy called value investing. What he does, he attributes his success to buying optimistically when everyone else is staying away from it, is acting pessimistically towards a product. He invests when it's low, and he has the positive thought that it's going to get better. If you take a room of CEOs or very successful people, you'll see oftentimes they have a natural optimism and a positive energy about them. I spoke to a cardiologist friend of mine who told me a fascinating experiment was that he had heard about from one of his friends. He said that they took a study of children who were diagnosed with cancer, and a control of them, what they did was they had the kids play Pac-Man. And Pac-Man is a game that had like that guy, and he's munching it's from the 80s. And they told the kids that pretend the little munchy things are your cancer. Those children who had that state of mind did exceedingly better in their results and in their progress than those who didn't have in mind. Everyone probably in this room has heard of the book The Secret or the documentary The Secret. So we see that the idea, the law of attraction, how positive thoughts breed results, is very much in vogue. The idea that positive thoughts, that positive thinking will bring good results, and that negative thoughts bring negative results, is the core of cognitive psychotherapy. That you think good, if you think good about yourself, that you'll be empowered and you'll be able to change. So the question is, what does the Torah say? We see that secular society is already coming around, that they acknowledge speech plays a role in shaping creation, and that thoughts even can shape what takes place in reality. What does the Torah say? And the truth is, for us as Jews, we always have to look through the lens of the Torah. The Talmud, the Gemara in Nida, the end of chapter 3 says as follows: when the fetus is in the womb of its mother, two things happen to it. Number one, it sees from one end of the world to the other. It's shown the entire world. And secondly, it's taught the entire Torah. It says, next, when the fetus comes out after 9 months, an angel slaps the child on the mouth, and it forgets all the Torah that it learned. So I have a question. The question is, the Talmud only mentions that it forgets the Torah that it learned. But how come it doesn't remember what it saw? It says that it sees from this end of the world, from the other end of the world. How come I don't remember what the whole world looks like and I saw it? And the answer is because without Torah, you can't see anything. Through the lens of the Torah is how we gain clarity to reality. In Jewish meditation, it's taught that without meditating on godly concepts, without meditating on Torah ideas, that the subconscious of a person remains unrectified. A person can't stop thinking. Should we try an experiment? Everybody up for an experiment? All right. When I say go, we'll take 10 seconds, and I want you to stop thinking. Ready? Go. All right, who's thinking? And who's not thinking but thinking, I'm not thinking. So the mind can't stop thinking. The question is, what are we thinking about? Our natural inclination is to think about the natural world at best, and at worst, to look at that natural world in a natural look, which is negative, which will be drawn down to negativity. We always have to have positive thoughts. The truth is that any positive thoughts will work. If a person wants to really excel in life, any positive thoughts will work. But Torah ideas about optimism are especially effective. Like the Talmud, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, Ein toiv ela Torah. Torah is the ultimate good. Therefore, if we think concepts of Torah, or if we understand the Torah's principle of positive thinking, that will be the greatest force in order to accomplish that. Many of us may be familiar with the story from the Torah about Joseph. Joseph is the favored son of his father Jacob. He's given a very nice coat. And he's sent one day to go check on the rest of his brothers, see how they're doing. And we know the story. What happens is, superficially they're jealous of him, and they end up throwing him in a pit. Now the Torah tells us something about this pit. It says that the pit was empty, there was no water in it. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. The Medrash says, isn't that a bit redundant? If it was empty, I know there's no water in it. It's empty. So the Medrash clarifies, it says, yes, it was empty of water, but it was filled with snakes and scorpions. In the Talmud, the Gemara in Bava Kama says that water is symbolic of the refreshing flow of Torah wisdom. The pit can be compared to the human mind. The pit is the vessel, the human mind. If the human mind is not filled with water, the only other option is that it's going to be filled with snakes and scorpions. If we don't have the positive perspective in our mind, if we don't have Torah ideas in our mind, a rectified subconscious, what's going to be filling it? Snakes and scorpions. With our own thoughts, we don't have to fight off negativity. I've spoken to many people, and they said, I'm so negative. I'm a negative person. I don't know how to get rid of these negative thoughts. And the truth is, we don't have to get rid of the negative thoughts. We just have to increase the positive thoughts. If a person has a vat of poison, and this vat, you can't pick it up, you can't dump out the poison, but you want to fill it, just stick a hose in there and keep adding water until the poison gets out of there. Fill our minds with so much positivity and so much Torah that the negativity will just disappear. Engraving Torah concepts in our mind through contemplation and meditation, we will only see things in the positive light with optimism and confidence. There's a classic story from the Talmud about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva would travel oftentimes town to town, and he traveled with what you traveled with in those days. He traveled with a donkey to transport his things. He traveled with a rooster in order to wake him up, and he traveled with a candle in order that he can sit and study. So he went on his way, he came to a village, and he starts knocking on doors for some hospitality. Knocks on one, we're full. Knocks on the next, sorry Charlie. Next one, and he can't find any lodging for that night. So what does he do? He has a mantra that he says to himself, a way of thinking that he lived by. He says, Kol da'avid rachmana l'tav avid. Everything that God does, he does for good. That was his mantra, that's what he lived by. Everything that happens is for the best. So he goes out to the field and finds lodging in the field. What happens that night? First, a lion comes and devours his donkey. Great. Next, the wind comes, blows out his candle. Oh, now he can't learn. I just sit in the dark. And then a weasel comes and devours his rooster. Oh, this is really a great night. But Rabbi Akiva had a mantra. And Rabbi Akiva had a perspective that he lived by. Kol da'avid rachmana l'tav avid. Everything that God does is for the best. Everything is good. It's all good. So he goes to sleep, wakes up the next morning, and finds out that the village that he had been knocking on had been ransacked by the Romans. People had been beaten, people had been murdered, and if he would have found lodging in that village, he would never have survived. Moreover, if his donkey would have heard the commotion, it would have let out some howls. If his rooster heard the commotion, he would let out some coos. And if they saw a light in the field, the Romans would have come and attacked him as well. Kol da'avid rachmana l'tav avid. Everything Hashem does is for the good. And he lived with this principle, and that was the effect that it had. One thing that's very interesting, I'll throw it out there as sort of a Kabbalistic footnote. We know in Jewish tradition that there's a concept of gematrias. Gematria is a numeric equivalent that certain words or phrases that match numerically other words or phrases. For example, Aleph would be 1, Beis would be 2. Certain things that match up numerically are related to each other. They have the same essence. The gematria, the numeric value of Rabbi Akiva's phrase, Kol ta'avid rachmana latov avid, everything God does is for the good, has the numeric value of 611. You know what else has the numeric value of 611? The word Torah. If a person engraves Torah in their mind, if a person looks at the world through the lens of the Torah and through the Torah perspective, will be able to not only be positive, but see positive results in the world. Now, we understand the importance of positive thinking. However, what does Judaism say about how our positive thoughts actually affect the world at large? How does it affect reality? The secret, as we discussed earlier, holds by a concept called the law of attraction. The idea that thoughts influence reality. The secret talks about a universal intelligence that responds to our desires and our positive visualizations. If you really want something and you truly believe in it, posits the book, it'll happen. Now, first of all, whenever academia or the secular world says the universe or the universal intelligence, what they really mean is God. They can't say God, because that's something for the theologians to discuss. But what they really mean, universal intelligence, the universe, is a sort of divine essence to reality as we know it, what we call God. In the God world, in the world where God is interacting with us and watching over us, I can't say that the Torah perspective agrees 100% with the law of attraction. Because any whims or cravings or desire that we have, God's just going to grant it to us, or it's going to appear out of thin air? No. However, there are some fascinating parallels that we're going to explore. How do our thoughts create reality, change the fiber of reality? It's very much related to an idea in Judaism on the idea of trust in God. Trust in God. Trust in Hebrew, and as it's talked about in the philosophical works, is called bitachon. Bitachon means trusting in God. Now, it's different from a concept that we know called emunah, which is faith in God. What's the difference between faith, emunah, and trust, bitachon? So many people think that bitachon, trust, is just a more intense feeling of faith. One is faith, and one is really, really, really strong faith called trust. Bitachon is really, really strong emunah, in other words. It's a little bit different. To sum it up, emunah, faith, if we were going to encapsulate the entire idea maybe to a sentence or two, it's the idea that we believe that everything is guided in the grand scheme of things. Whether I perceive something as good, or whether I perceive something as not good, I believe, I have emunah, I have faith, that everything has a reason, although I may not see the good in it at the moment, everything has sort of a reason. This is something that obviously breeds serenity, because whatever happens is meant to be. It's a good idea. Whether what I perceive as good is actually good, or I perceive it as good, is one thing. But I have faith that everything happens for a reason. Trust is a little bit deeper. Trust says, I have absolute certainty. Absolute certainty and conviction that God is going to make things good. And not only good in the grand scheme of things, but good in a way that I can relate to the good. We're presented with a certain situation. A person goes through a challenge, somebody loses their job, for example, or is in a transition in life. A person with bitachon, with true bitachon, which is not easy to do. No one's saying that. But someone with true trust, true bitachon, says it has a certainty that I believe, I know that God is going to do good for me, and not only good in a way that is good in the grand scheme, but a good in a way that I can relate to. There's a wonderful biblical narrative that really demonstrates the dynamics of trust and how it works, and further, how our thoughts create the reality in which we live. Many people, many of us are probably familiar with Moses in Egypt. And Moses, one day, he encounters an Egyptian beating on an Israelite. And what does the Torah tell us that Moses does when he encounters this? He kills the Egyptian. Following that occurrence, Moses then finds two Israelites, two Jews fighting. That happens. Two Jews fighting. He found two Jews fighting. And Moses goes over, hey guys, what's going on here? Try to break it up. And so one of them says to him, what do they say? You gonna kill us like you killed the Egyptians? The Torah says something very shocking after that. It says like this, Moses became frightened. He said, indeed, the matter has become known. And right away afterwards, the Torah tells us, Pharaoh heard of the incident and sought to slay Moses. So Moses becomes frightened. The account, the story had become known. And Pharaoh, then it says after that, Pharaoh heard of the incident and sought to slay Moses. Why does the Torah tell us about Moses' emotional response? Moses became frightened. It's not something typical in the Torah to talk to us about our forefathers' emotional issues or struggles that they're going through, how they felt. Abraham was happy then. Isaac felt nice. Moses was scared. But when the Torah goes out of its way to describe something, it's meant as a lesson. First of all, it's a normal reaction. Wouldn't you be scared? Wouldn't the normal person, wouldn't even a great person be scared? It's a normal reaction. Why does the Torah have to tell us that? We could probably assume that he'd be scared. So everything in the Torah is meant, every word, every letter, and even every crown on every letter is meant as an eternal lesson for all Jews in all places at all times. Why does the Torah, what's the eternal lesson that we're being taught by the Torah telling us that Moses was scared and then subsequently being taught that Pharaoh heard? In order to get the answer, we're going to preface with a short idea. The idea is brought by the Rambam, the famed medieval sage Maimonides, in his magnum opus of philosophy, the Mor Nevuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed. He says as follows: the human mind is intimately connected with the active intellect, the divine intellect. This is a divine attribute independent of the human being. Our thoughts are influenced by this active intellect, and it also attracts energy from it. Meaning that there's a give and take in what happens in our mind and what happens in the world. The Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, explains the juxtaposition of these verses in the Torah and tells us a tremendous lesson for our daily life. Again, the verses that are juxtaposed, Moses becomes frightened, and he says, indeed, the matter has become known, and right away, Pharaoh heard of the incident and sought to slay Moses. The Rebbe says these verses are juxtaposed, and the Torah indicates Moses' fear for the following reason. Moses' fear, his negative outlook, his thought process, is what caused Pharaoh to hear. Meaning, because of the fact that he became scared, the world became a scary place. Because of the fact that that moment, that there was a certain lacking in trust, a lacking in certainty, that things are going to be perfect and things are going to be good in a way that I can see them as good, the world became a scary place. Because Moses was scared, because he was frightening, the world became a frightening place. Now, the assurance that our thoughts and that God is going to do good things in a way that I can perceive them as good is not an easy task. We're filled all the time with doubts, rightfully so. We're human beings and we live in a world where things challenge the way that we think. But when a person does it, the thought actually becomes the conduit to draw down God's blessings. The thought itself, the perfect trust that we have, becomes the utensil, becomes the vehicle that allows God's bounty, God's blessing to reveal itself, to show itself in the world. So through us thinking positively, through us thinking and having trust that things are going to be good, the reality will come, and that is through the conduit of the thought. Even to the undeserving, even to somebody who, based on their actions or their day-to-day life, may not be worthy of God's bounty. Just the fact that they have the trust at that moment with perfect certainty creates the reality, creates the vehicle for that blessing to take place in the world. The Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad, was approached by a person who had a severely ill child. And he told him a very beautiful phrase. He said, think good, and it will be good. Tracht good, it sein good. Think good, think positive, and it's going to be positive. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek wasn't informing, giving him a pat on the back and saying, think good, life's good. It wasn't wishful thinking. But he said, through your positive thoughts, it will influence that reality will actually be good. Anyone who's dabbled a little bit in quantum physics finds that we find a similar thing in the development of information, how the research is beginning to show itself. And that was something that was really brought out and publicized by The Secret. Nobel Prize-winning physicist John Wheeler said the observer is essential in the universe to exist. The observer is essential for the universe to exist. Another Nobel laureate, Eugene Wigner, says that the conscious observer, specifically a person with free will, is necessary to act on quantum particles to bring them into a state of real existence, meaning that existence doesn't exist until a free-willed being observes it and wills it into reality. Very similar to what we're talking about here. Just by the thought, just by thinking positively, thinking in the right term of things, it creates the reality that is good, is desirable. Let's talk about a little bit the mechanics of how this works. Many of us, including myself and including Moses, aren't always 100% of the time able to have a perfect trust in God. It happens. But until that time comes, there's an idea, some food for thought, how we can think, how our positive thoughts influence reality in a very practical way. When God created the worlds, He went from unbridled bounty, unbridled godliness, to a world that we find ourselves in today, to a realm that we find ourselves in today of constriction, where godliness is not apparent. And this constriction or limitation, this veil, is very similar to what the physicists talk about when they talk about different dimensions of reality. How reality as we see it isn't the actual reality that exists. There's so much more to it than we're privy to. We have a very limited scope. The dimensions go as follows. The first dimension is one direction, length. Take for example. Okay? 2 dimensions is length and width, right? Any photograph is an object that is the people on the photograph photograph exists in the second dimension, just length and width, two-dimensional object, just like a painting, same thing. If you want an example of a moving two-dimensional object, think of, everyone remember from the 1980s, Mario, the first Mario that came out, little flat guy walking along. All he can do is up, down, left, and right. For Mario, or Pong, we have to bring it back a little bit, a few more years back. Pong, the tennis game where it's these two little flapping things hitting that circle ball, not a round ball, but a circle ball, two-dimensional ball, back and forth with each other. So that's something existing in two dimension. Now, to a two-dimensional object, the idea of a third dimension, third dimension is the reality that we currently live in, is length, width, and depth, or height. A three-dimensional object. We live in a three-dimensional world. We can go this way, we can go all directions, we can go out. So for a two-dimensional figure, for Mario, we'll call him, the idea of a third dimension, of being able to go this way, that this is part of reality, is completely beyond his realm of thought. So what's the fourth dimension? That's right. One is a measure of length, one is a measure of width, one is a measure of height, and the measure of change is time. Time is the fourth dimension. Meaning, and again, it's a concept that we can't really fathom because we live in the third dimension. But if a person could look at the world or look at another person in the fourth dimension, you would see them as they were a minute ago and a minute from now, all existing simultaneously at the same time. Whoa. Not only would you see them as they exist a minute from now and a minute ago at the same time, but you'd see them from womb to tomb, from the time that they were born until the time that they die, all at the same moment. You'd see them all in one simultaneously existing moment. Now, if you think about this for too long, your head explodes. But just the idea that there's a concept called the fourth dimension, time, where all time exists, where all what we call time, which is really a veil, exists simultaneously at once. And if you take it a step back, everything that happened from the beginning of creation that will happen until the end of time will be seen simultaneously, all at one point, if we could view the world in the fourth dimension. Past, present, and future existing all at once. Wow. Interestingly enough, in Jewish texts, this idea is brought out to a forefront. Rabbi Eliezer Dessler, in his famous work, Michtav Eliyahu, says something very interesting. When a person is born, he's placed under the concealment of time. After his passing, the concealment of time will be removed, and he will view everything simultaneously, and he'll see that time is merely a veil, since everything was really one reality appearing all together. What's interesting as well is Dr. Raymond Moody, his famous book, Life After Life, bestseller, who he interviewed and did studies, extensive studies, on people who had near-death experiences. Upon his research, upon speaking to them at length, what did they describe? What was the experience that they experienced in their near-death experience? Was a world that all time existed at the same time. All time existed at once, in one simultaneous unit. So that's the fourth dimension. We're going somewhere with this. Don't lose track yet. What would be the fifth dimension? We're going to stop there after the fifth dimension, because I don't know about you, but this is getting. What would be the fifth dimension? So if the fourth dimension, time, is everything that happened from the beginning of time until the end of time, all existing in one simultaneous point, the fifth dimension would be as follows. At every given moment, you have an option, and the world has an option. It doesn't have to be according to one timeline, the way that things actually work out in the world of action. But at every moment, I could do like this, or I could do like this, or an infinite amount of other possibilities. So at every moment, there's an infinite amount of possibilities of things that can take place in the world. Every single moment. that the timeline can go like this or like this or like this. Every single moment has infinite possibilities that can happen in that one moment. In the realm of action that we operate in, we can only have access to one timeline. In our thoughts, however, we have access to every potential at every moment. Meaning that when a person thinks positive about a certain scenario, he brings that potential future, that possibility, one step closer to themselves. Through viewing the world in a positive perspective, again, in every moment you have an infinite amount of possibilities of what could happen in the world. Through thinking about the positive way, the way that you want it to, the way you would like to have it, you connect yourself more. You walk through that portal of existence. You walk through that portal of reality. You help bring it closer to tangibility in a way that you can experience. So thinking positive brings that potential closer to our real world course of events. I'm going to close with a story, some food for thought. We talked this afternoon about positive thinking and how positive thinking shapes the world in which we live and how it can create a positive reality. This food for thought is just something to chew over, something to live with, about our purpose here in this world, life in general, and how we can start thinking positive and what can motivate us to start thinking positive in our own daily life. This story is actually a mashal, an analogy given over by the Baal Shem Tov, founder of the Hasidic movement. There was a certain gentleman who lived his allotted time in this world. He lived his 120 years, and he passed away and went to heaven. And as he's walking up to the gates of heaven, the angel is taking attendance. Says, all right this way, Mr. Epstein. All right, Epstein, great life. You did a really good job. Go right through these gates and enjoy your heavenly experience. So Mr. Epstein says, angel, I have a bit of a uncommon request for you. My whole life, I've heard about the other place. I don't want to go there, permanently, but I've heard so much about it. Could you just show it to me? Saw so many movies on it, so many TV shows, and they've talked so much about it. Can I just see what it looks like? So the angel says, well, this is highly unorthodox, but, for you lived a good life, let me just show you. So they go down the divine elevator, and they look through the window of HE double hockey stick. And in that window, Mr. Epstein sees something that blows his mind. He's expecting to see pitchforks, and devils, and goblins, and lava, and all sorts of hot, horrible people. What does he see instead? He sees the grand ballroom of a cruise ship. What appears to be the grand ballroom of a cruise ship. Maybe the grand ballroom of the Hyatt Regency. It looks a room just like that. And there's a very long table, and at the long table are very well-dressed people on both sides of the table. And the waiters come out in very finely dressed clothes and place the food on the table, and everyone's very excited and very hungry. And the waiters take off the lid, and the food is piping hot, and everyone's mouth is watering. And everyone lifts up their hand ready to dig in, but attached to their hand is a fork that's 4 feet long, and they can't eat the food because the fork is too long. So everyone starts screaming and howling and crying, why? And so Mr. Epstein says, I can't take the suffering. Please take me back to heaven. They go back to heaven. It looks like a very similar setup. Same grand ballroom of the cruise ship, same long table, same well-dressed people on both sides, finely dressed. Out come the waiters in tuxes with piping hot food. Of course, the food in heaven is glad kosher. And they place it on the table. They lift up the lid, and the food is piping hot, and everyone's very excited, and everyone's ready to eat, and everyone lifts up their hand in order to eat, and attached to their hand is a fork that's 4 feet long, and they can't eat. All of a sudden, in heaven, what does everyone do? They start feeding the person across from them. In our life, if we are only thinking about ourselves and thinking about what's going to be the next thing for me, how can I feed myself, how can I get the next pleasure, our life is going to be a very negative place. But if my life is about what can I do for the other, what can I do to help shape the world around me, how can I find my peace in the world that I live in, life will be a life of heaven. It's all about perspective. It's all about positive thinking. It's all about the way in which we view things. A little bit of homework for everybody that we'll close with before we have to move on is that not so much this week, because everyone's going to have probably a great week up until Sunday night. But when you get back to the grind of work and the hustle and bustle of life and the bills pouring in and the screaming children, let's try and change our perspective. When we find ourselves in a scenario that looks bleak, that's a bit of a challenge, try and think positive. And by thinking good, it will be good.